Whenever somebody figures out how to crack the content personalization nut right, they are going to make a lot of money, and they're going to make a lot of people a lot of money.
This is Velocitize Talks, and I'm Andy North. I'm joined today by Phil Crumm, Director of New Client Strategy at 10up.
Great to be here, Andy.
Thanks for being here.
Appreciate it.
Well, tell us a little bit about 10up and what is going on, some of the great work you guys are up to.
Sure. So 10up is a full-service digital agency. We do design work, we do strategy work, engineering work, some supporting things like audience and revenue strategy, how our clients make money. We're completely distributed, which is a little exciting. We're about 170 strong now, spread across the globe. We work with a lot of really cool brands, ranging from traditional publishers like ESPN to more, I'll call it, folks who don't realize they're publishers but are starting to think of themselves like that, like Credit Karma and Uber and other big companies that are beginning to recognize the power of content and what it has for their business and starting to think about how they can leverage it as a value add in all their marketing efforts.
That's exciting. You are an accomplished author online and have written some great articles on Medium that I've been impressed with. You wrote one about how WordPress will die. Tell me a little bit about that, if you do truly think it's dying, and if it does die, does something replace it, or has it become sort of just a proprietary world?
So WordPress is at a little bit of an interesting point in its life cycle right now, in that for a long time it's grown pretty strongly across a couple of different places in the market. It originally grew up, as I'm sure we all know, kind of as a blogging platform. We think of that more as the long tail now, but back 15 years ago when WordPress was started, that was content online. And eventually evolved into a platform that was strong and robust for use cases ranging from those smaller blogs all the way up to much bigger corporate initiatives. And over time, the gap between how those two different audiences think about content, think about the kind of content they want to write, how they want to publish it, what its real mission is, has changed quite a bit. And we've gotten to this interesting time now where there are now different platforms kind of picking off both ends of that spectrum in different ways. On the low end of the spectrum, we have solutions like Squarespace and Wix, which are becoming a lot more popular and starting to cannibalize that market a little bit. And on the high end, we're starting to see, again, a resurgence of some of the more traditional commercial CMS players like Sitecore, to a lesser extent Adobe Experience Managers and others, starting to see some new entrants like Contentful popping into the game that make for an interesting next couple of years for the WordPress platform, I think.
A lot of people would say that the enterprise is starting to open up to WordPress. Maybe not for their .com, but for some of the content that they have out there that they need to spin up quickly, or they need marketing to be able to update it on a regular basis. Do you see that continuing? Do you see that diminishing and leaning back more towards the proprietary software, the Sitecores of the world?
I think the opportunity is definitely there. At the end of the day, most enterprise players are going to pick the platform that does the most for them and helps them reach their mission, whether that's their business goals or something a little bit more philosophical, the best they can. Over the next couple of years, we're going to get to a place where things like content personalization, integration with artificial intelligence and machine learning technologies, and a number of other nascent things that are starting to gain some mind share become a lot more sophisticated. There is an outcome there where WordPress is able to, through its ecosystem, manage to find solutions to a lot of those challenges and become a leader in that space and become a platform that enterprises turn to because it can deliver that value. You know, there's also an outcome where some of those other new enterprise platforms, like some of the ones we talked about earlier, manage to find their footing there first and start picking off some of the market because of it.
Shifting gears slightly to the sort of the Martech universe, do you see these over 6,000 Martech players and software packages consolidating over time, and the universe has continued to expand to a point where has it started to slow down and stop and contract a bit?
I think it's starting to contract. For a long time, a lot of the technology, particularly the AI and ML technology that differentiated a number of those Martech platforms, was very difficult to build, very expensive to build, and it took a lot of manpower, which just wasn't really feasible to be able to pick those folks off. It's getting to a place now with offerings like Amazon Web Services, Google Cloud Platform, Microsoft Azure, and others, where some of those tools have become commodities at this point. On one hand, you know, that's a good thing because it means new players can come into the game and innovate in a little bit of a different way and start to solve some challenges in ways that are new and exciting and push the rest of the market forward. But it also means it's becoming a lot harder to differentiate yourself within that space because you can no longer hang your hat on the 24 data science PhDs who you happen to employ.
In your article, you mentioned that content is additive. The value is additive, and not necessarily monetizable on its own. Can you expand a little bit on that and your thoughts in general on content marketing, which has just become the new buzzword? Is there too much content? Is there enough? Are we still feeding the beast enough? Where do you see that going?
Right, it's actually interesting you mentioned that, in that we work with publishers kind of on both sides of that spectrum. We're traditional content publishers, like I mentioned earlier, and then folks who are primarily content marketers, the folks who I say are publishers but don't realize it yet. And over the last, especially the last 2-3 years, but even over the last decade, it's become a lot harder to build a business solely focused on content. You now have to pay to drive traffic to your site. Click-based revenue on advertisements is starting to contract. It's hard to build a business model just solely off of content. The main area of growth that we've seen, both within our own portfolio and sort of across the broader market, is folks ranging from SaaS startups to companies that are just becoming invested in brand marketing, even initiatives like Velocitize, where they really see it as a way to get their story and their message and their leadership out there, to help build brand credibility, to help build brand recognition, to help reach customers in ways that feels a little bit less salesy than throwing somebody into a funnel and telling them to enter their email address, and get you to that 7 to 11 touch points that brands require before most people are willing to purchase anything from them, because they've built up that trust.
Another one of your pieces in Medium was how laptops need to be more like phones. Given that, do you see that the website is essentially a dying breed? Or do you see, with perhaps PWA and AMP and some of the new technologies that are enhancing websites, do you see them having a resurgence?
So I spend a lot of time talking about our clients with sort of the notion of, is a mobile app valuable? Should we just go web early? And I think in a way, I come from an engineering background. There is an attractiveness for technologists to lose the plot a little bit in becoming very focused on the technologies that we're using and losing sight of the problems that we're trying to solve in the first place. And for me, it's really a question of friction. So I bought a cellular iPad Pro a little bit earlier this year. It is by far and away probably the best purchase I've ever made, because it is an incredibly friction-free experience. If I am sitting around in bed, if I'm on an airplane, if I'm in the back of an Uber, if I'm at a conference, and something pops into my head and I want to be able to handle it on an interface that's a little bit easier to use as a phone, open up, stare at it so that it unlocks with my face, and boom, I'm there.
At 10up, are you seeing your clients, as Director of New Client Strategies, are they coming in with a technology in mind, or are you having to sort of, let's find out the problem that you're really trying to solve, or the opportunity that you're taking advantage of?
We always try to dig into the strategic part of the process, try to understand what those big picture goals are and figure out what the best way to solve them is, even if folks come in with a pre-described technology. WordPress, to your point earlier, is starting to get to a place where it is becoming not only a lot more accepted in the enterprise space, I think, but often favored. You hire folks from a newsroom that previously used WordPress, your content creators love it. They tell you, we hate this current platform, we need to be on WordPress, let's talk about what it means to get on WordPress. But even then, there's a very broad spectrum of the work that we can do, and we are benefiting our clients by digging into some of those bigger picture questions and some of the more tactical questions, sometimes in a little bit more depth, to make sure that we're truly solving the right problem.
Are there any new technologies out there that you're excited about, or that you see within the next 3 to 5 years coming down the line that would be of value not only to you as an agency, but to your clients?
All my chips right now are in the artificial intelligence and machine learning space. Content publishing tends to be an industry that is a little bit slow to adopt new technologies, very often because there aren't always a lot of immediately obvious value that can be delivered from it. But AI and ML are interesting because there are some very tangible benefits that can be implemented today using some of the solutions that Amazon, Azure, GCP have made available to us.
AI was the immediate technology that you went to. In addition to AI, lately there's been, particularly in marketing, a lot of buzz about personalization. What role, if any, do you see, or growing role, do you see personalization having in content marketing?
Whenever somebody figures out how to crack the content personalization nut right, they're going to make a lot of money, and they're going to make a lot of people a lot of money. I've talked to a number of folks in CMO style roles who have a dream of a platform that knows what your purchasing intent is, knows what cohort you're in, knows what product you're looking for, where you are in that purchasing pipeline. If you go to a landing page that's running in a paid social campaign, you will see something that's tailored to you. And I do think we will eventually get there. It sounds a little science fiction-y, but Salesforce, I know, has been rolling out some interesting tooling in the artificial intelligence space that's oriented towards that automatic cohort recognition and analysis. I'm sure many others will come along with that. It's one of those things where we all know that we want it. We all know that it's going to be tremendously valuable. And the issue so far has been putting the pieces together in a way that makes it manageable and scalable at the volume that today's content marketing business is run at.
Question we ask all our guests: is there a book, blog, or podcast that you're interested in or reading that you'd like to share with our viewers?
So I actually just finished a book on the flight over here called The Mom Test. The author's name escapes me. I hope if he sees this, he'll accept my apology. But it's a very interesting examination into the notion of talking to your customers.
Our guest today has been Phil Crumm, Director of New Client Strategies at 10up. Phil, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it being here.